So I mentioned in the previous discussion, I mentioned the New Age movement, and I touched on the New Age philosophy and how that combined with science could possibly be the reason that we believe in a spiritual evolution. We look at science, we look at the world, and we realize that science is advancing something. Technology is advancing. If we look at technology of 10 years ago, of 20 years ago, of movies, anything that was made by technology is improving, and we are becoming better at doing certain things. And it's only natural to assume that if you keep on doing one thing, you would become better at it. So that assumption is interpreted, I think, in the context of the New Age movement as a spiritual evolution too. So the New Age movement, what is that? And when did it start? I understand the New Age movement basically started somewhere in the late 19th century. It really got rolling. And there were some key figures in it. There were some people like Madame Blavatsky or Ellen von Hahn, and of course Gurdjieff, and there were some their followers. They were the main, and some other people were the main propagators of the New Age movement and the Theosophical Society. And although the New Age movement did not have its own specific philosophy, like the Theosophical Society mainly saw themselves in the beginning as a kind of as missionaries to the West, bringing the philosophy of the East to the West. So, but it gathered a lot of momentum, and in the process started developing kind of, you could say, a look and feel of its own. You could say it became something roughly known as the New Age philosophy. So, and this organization or this philosophy absorbed a lot of other philosophies, a lot of ancient holistic practices were adopted into this seamless kind of this seamless way of seeing things, and so yeah, and in that way it developed its own kind of look and feel, which people roughly refer to as something that is New Age, and something that comes from the Eastern philosophy and so forth. It's of course mixed with the Western and American way of life, which was new, better, improved. If you think we're living in the West, I'm living in the West, and in the West people always want to convince you that they have something that's better, something that is new, something that's improved. And to sell something, if you want to sell something, obviously you have to have a lot of motivation, you have to display a lot of positive energy. And this goes with advertising. So, and this is also a key component of the people who initiated the New Age movement. They were proselyting, they were selling their ideas. Lots of gurus who came from the East, and they definitely had a message. Many of them had a very good message for the West. But you have to ask yourself, why did they come here? So their masters often became a Swami, arrived here, and he was sent by his master. And his master basically expressed concern for the West. I think they looked at us, they said, we are in dire need of spiritual assistance. But in many cases it was mainly because also it could be because they were in dire need of financial assistance. So it's like they felt maybe it was a win-win situation. They sent one of the best disciples here, and they could in that way get a financial, it could be lucrative for them. And this is an obvious thing. If you go to India, this is what many of those so-called masters are interested in. They're interested in the money. So, but coming back to the New Age movement, it adopted this positivism and this idea of selling something. So, and that also is a cause for them to their way of looking at the world is very idealistic. It's like there is an evolution, everything's going to become better, we are advancing spiritually, we are going to a better place. There's a purpose for everything. This is very important, especially in the West, for people to believe that there's a purpose to their lives, that things are going to become better, that God or the universe has something better in store for them. There's someone who's looking out for you. This is a key component of most Western philosophies and most Western religions. So having said that, it should be clearer why we feel there's a spiritual advancement, there's a spiritual evolution in the world, which when we say the world, we mean the West. Very few people in the West understand the East, the Middle East. From our perspective, there's a lot of changes, and in some religions, of course, they interpret it as the world is coming to an end. You feel something is happening, something is going to happen. So the feeling of something is happening, the feeling of change is been a very big theme in our lives here. But it's not so in the East and Middle East. In very traditional societies, things are happening there the same way it has been for thousands of years. The same people, for instance, in Persia and Iran, the people who are living there are the same people who have been living there for thousands of years. So it's not the same feeling when you're there, as opposed to when here. We've only been here for a few hundred years, so we're quite insecure and uncertain about the future. We don't really know if we just recently came here. We don't know if we're going to vanish just the same. So, but nevertheless, the New Age philosophy has brought us good elements and bad elements to my view. Some good elements is obviously it has introduced people to the East, and if it weren't for that, I think I would never have known about Buddhism and yoga and things like that. So, having said that, the other side of the coin is this, and I use the word fragments, which is a word used by Gurdjieff first. And I adopted that word, and Gurdjieff was talking about the fragments of an unknown teaching. And this is an important thing to consider, because we have ancient practices, ancient traditions, things that have been practiced for thousands of years possibly in the other side of the world, and we are introducing them to people here in the West, mixed with the Western culture of you can have things now instantly, fast food, instant gratification. Go on this course and you can be enlightened in 30 days, something like that. And it may seem a harmless plight or a harmless exploit to make some money out of unsuspecting seekers on the spiritual path in the West here. And in many cases, that's all it ends up being. People just feel that they're being entertained by ideas, by the incense, by the smells and the sounds of the East, and that's what they are buying, in fact. But the real practices of the Middle East, of India, the real yoga practices, is something that not anybody can have success in. So Gurdjieff mentioned that there with these masters of the East who would adopt orphans. I suppose orphans because they were maybe expendable, and they'll have several students. They would know that if they had 5 students they could concentrate on for several years, they know that one of these 5 students, nothing would happen to him. The practices wouldn't have an effect on his consciousness. The second student could go mad, you know. It wouldn't it wouldn't be successful. It would be a failed product. And maybe another student, nothing would happen, or would advance only a certain amount, maybe receive some sort of wisdom. But maybe only 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 5 students would actually reach the goal, and they could develop their consciousness. And this is a kind of, as Gurdjieff explained, a kind of risk they took, but a kind of numbers game as well. Not everybody is capable of understanding what the certain philosophy is teaching. And of course a good master might be able to look at a student from the beginning and know where the student's going to go, how far they would be able to advance. So yes, so with a real meditation practice there are certain stumbling blocks, there are certain roadblocks, there are certain stages you develop, you reach where you cannot go further. In general, most people cannot go further without the help of a real master. And if you're in that stage, things can go wrong. Things can go wrong on the psychic level too. And people who have never advanced to these stages wouldn't know that. They simply feel that meditation is always good, it's always wonderful, it always leads to peace and quiet, and it's just like the New Age movement, everything is perfect. But in fact these practices were quite serious and in many cases harmful too, under the wrong supervision. I suppose there's a select number of people who could do it on their own, who didn't need the master, and they were of course very there were special cases, I suppose. So this is an indication of why these ancient philosophies often kept their traditions secret. It's not something that everybody should know about, or everybody is able to practice. So yeah, and this is an interesting thing too, that how do you perfect something that's already perfect? So you have these philosophies, you have these traditions and practices been practiced for thousands of years. There's no need to try and improve on that. As we feel in the West, everything has to be improved. It's true that a philosophy that's alive could be changing. So somebody could come along and change it, adapt it for people who are different. And that is what many teachers in the West have done. There have been many good teachers in the West. I'm sure many masters have come here. There are a lot of competent people who have taught yoga and who have taught these philosophies. But it is something that displays the difference between the East and the West, and the way of looking at the world, the way of looking at the concept of spiritual evolution. And that's my take on it. It's to add to my other video. And if you have any questions, send them to me. If you want to leave a comment, do it, feel free. Subscribe to my channel. You're welcome. And I'll see you soon.